The school curriculum in Northern Ireland has, at its core, an emphasis on the development of the skills and capabilities of pupils, for their lifelong learning and for their effective contribution to society. They are infused throughout the revised curriculum at each key stage. Pupils should have opportunities to acquire, develop and demonstrate these skills in all areas. There are many strategies being implemented at a whole school level to help pupils develop thinking skills and personal capabilities. Here, in St MacNissi's Primary School in Glengormley, the principal and the Thinking Skills Coordinator share their experiences of one of the approaches they are using to direct pupil thinking.
The teaching of thinking came about through the introduction to the revised curriculum. As a school, we would have taken on board assessment for learning and the various strategies that were incorporated in that. Particularly the fact that children were involved in the development of the learning intentions and success criteria. Having developed that culture of children having a voice in their learning, we then moved on to the thinking skills. We looked around for a tool to use to help to develop those thinking skills, and the thinking maps were presented to us. It seemed a natural progression from assessment for learning to go into the thinking skills through the thinking maps. I think there's a culture within the school that the staff are proactive in terms of developing the children's thinking. It was important for us that the school, all teachers, were bought into this. The fact that it linked into professional development and what was being developed in school at the time was important, so it wasn't something that was being brought in isolation. It actually was a development of something else.
To improve standards within the school, we decided to firstly implement thinking maps. These are a set of 8 visual tools which are specifically aimed at independent thinking skills and processes. In order to embed these successfully, we took, with the support of the board, the 16 weeks for the implementation of 8 maps, therefore 2 weeks per map. In this way, all teachers were implementing the same map at the same time, which ensured a commonality of approach and continuity across the whole school. Again, in this way, the shared language that was being developed and the thinking language throughout the school remained the same and was being used at the same time within all classrooms around the school and even in the staff room. Well, the 8 maps are visual patterns of individual thinking processes. For example, the first one, a circle map, would be generally used for brainstorming and defining in context. We would then use something like a bubble map to look at adjectives and adjectival phrases. So really when we're looking at descriptive language, for example, characterisation in our literacy, we may use a bubble map to describe the character. We then might use a double bubble map, which is used for the skill of comparing and contrasting. So where we may have looked at 2 characters individually, we may then bring them together and look at the comparing and contrasting of them, the similarities and differences. We may also use a tree map for classifying and sorting, particularly useful in the early years and particularly useful in numeracy, where we would be able to take something like, for example, shape, and the boys and girls may look at 2D shape and put them into the different categories, physically or pictorially or abstractly in their books. We've also got the flow map for the specific skill of sequencing. Again, throughout the school there are different areas that we may need to sequence, days of the week, months of the year. Further up the school we may be putting stories in sequence, orders of events, historical events in sequence, and that is where the children will automatically now think of a flow map and the sequence of flow map. The brace map is for whole part relationships, which is really taking things apart. So for example, if we were looking at 3D shape and we were looking at a cuboid, we may use a tissue box and show the tissue box when it's taken apart which parts of 2D shape is it made up by, so how many rectangles, how many squares and that sort of thing. And again, it just shows the children extremely visually how to take something apart and the whole part relationship that it shows. The bridge map is used for seeing analogies and really looking at things that are the same. So for example, it may be used in primary 7, we would have used it for similes. So we may have the sun is as something, as such and such is as. So again, it's about looking at things that are the same. It can be used in a variety of ways across the curriculum, as all maps can. The multi-flow map is used for cause and effect. So it's about looking at an event, perhaps an event in history, for example, World War II. What were the causes of World War II? What were the effects of World War II? And again, you can use half the map. You can just, with the early years, develop the causes of an event that's happened in school or the effects of that. Again, particularly useful in PDMU for bullying and different things that may occur in the school day. Really, the biggest change that we have noticed is in the children's talking and listening skills within the school, their ability to engage in meaningful conversation about their learning. We had always encouraged our children to speak about their learning. We'd always encouraged this, but we did feel a number of years back that we didn't have a structured approach to this. By talking about the maps and by using that shared language that right from our preschool to primary 7 are all using the language of sequencing, cause and effect, and that really the thinking language, that all the children of any ability and any age within the school can develop that language, share that language with themselves, with the teachers, with their parents, as we're trying to make the parents more aware of it, and the wider school community as a whole. Within literacy, we have noticed an improvement not only in talking and listening skills, but certainly in our emergent writing in the foundation years. For example, a Year 2 class, when looking at the genre of recount writing, had noticed that not only had they used the flow map to sequence the order of events, but the teacher actually noticed an improvement in the directionality of the children's handwriting. She then used the bubble map to look at characters and character descriptions and adjectival phrases without actually using the language of adjectives. The children were using that descriptive language. She then developed this by using the tree map to look at plot within story writing, within recount writing. So really what she was doing was using and infusing the maps throughout her literacy in order to improve the standard of the overall product at the end.
I think that the children speak volumes for the maps. It has allowed the children to structure their thinking. They're very, very visual in their content. And if you are going to go down the route of introducing the thinking maps, it is best done with whole staff, and it's best done linked into any development that's being carried out in school at that particular time. You need to get everyone involved in it, and that includes your parents. So it's in a number of ways you need to inform your parents of what you're doing, because it's unusual for the parents to see a map going home rather than a large piece of writing. It's extremely important that the parents buy into the thinking maps, because they are so visual in their content, and it would appear that there is very little content goes into them. It is about the thinking skills that the children have employed to develop the maps. So bringing your parents on board is important. We do that through our curriculum evenings. We present the maps to the parents. We ask them to take on board the maps, maybe to work at a map whilst they're in school, so they can see that it's not the amount of work that you have on a page, but it's the quality of thinking that's gone on to produce a map. I think as a school we will see the benefit after 7 years. The maps were introduced into all 7 years at the very beginning. We're in our 3rd year of developing the maps. Our P1 children are coming through. They're now at primary 3. To talk to those children and how they use the maps is very, very interesting about the thought process that goes on. When they get to primary 7, they'll have taken on board the maps, they'll have taken on board the hats, and hopefully we'll have achieved what we want, which is develop their thinking skills.
Well, at the moment in class we're reading the novel Kinzook's Kingdom, and I was asked to write a character profile of Kinzook, and I chose a bubble map because it helped me to find a variety of different adjectives to describe Kinzook. For example, creative, good at modelling.
This is a tree map, and in class we were talking about 2D shapes, particularly quadrilaterals. I chose this tree map, because we were meant to classify all the properties of quadrilaterals, so you were able to split them into their own shapes and tell about them. Like a diamond has 0 right angles but has 2 acute angles. I like using all sorts of maps because they can go very far in the curriculum, and I think all schools should be using them.
I like thinking maps because they are easy to work with, easy to read, and they stick in my mind because they're very visual. And in class we were learning to use number operations, and for this I chose a flow map,
and my number was 50 and my operation was divide by. For example, 625 divided by 50 is 102.5.
Well, I like them. I like thinking maps because they are enjoyable and they make it better instead of just writing down sentences. And, well, I chose a bridge map for MAS because in class we were learning to compare fractions, percentages and decimals. For example, you could have 3 hundredths, which is the same as 0.03 and 3%, or you could have 5 tenths, which is the same as 0.5 or 50%. I think all schools should be able to use thinking maps because it's just really fun to use.
The thinking maps do not stand on their own. They go along with the other strategies which were introduced through the revised curriculum. I've mentioned assessment for learning earlier. They are just one tool out of a number of tools that the school can use. Effective questioning is something that has been developed again through assessment for learning and has further been developed through the use of the thinking maps. Where we want to go next is to dip into the toolkit, and there are a number of tools that we can use and develop the thinking maps and moving towards the use of De Bono's thinking hats. The two complement each other, and with the thinking maps fully embedded in the life of the school, I think the thinking hats will take off and complement the thinking maps.